Good afternoon, 10th graders. Welcome to your first English virtual lesson. Today we got a topic that is relative clauses, as you can see here in the heading we have for today's class. The activity is the grammar explanation of it, and we are going to develop some practice for you to master the topic. When we have the grammar explanation, I always ask my students to grab your books and a highlighter to point out important aspects of the topic. So in this moment, please, after picking up your books, open them on page 164 and let's start. Relative clauses. Teacher Daniela, what are them and when do we have to use relative clauses? We can use relative clauses to join two English sentences or to give more information about something. I have explained to you last year that when you have two or three different pieces of information and you want to join them in a big and long sentence, you will call this a relative clause, the joinment of two or three different pieces of information. Teacher, how can we join these three different pieces of information? So easy. We're going to use a bridge. This bridge in the formal world is called relative pronoun. We have different relative pronouns depending on the context of the sentence. They are who, that, which, where, when, or whose. Those relative pronouns that they are going to work as bridges, as I already said, they have a specific purposes. It means that if I'm talking about a person or people, I'm going to use who. If I'm talking about an object, a situation, I'm going to use that. Or I can use also which, but this which has a very special usage, so we are going to see this further. Then we got where, that is another bridge or relative pronoun that we can use when we are talking about places. If we are talking about probably time, we are going to use the relative pronoun when. Or if we are talking about properties, possessions, ownership, we can use whose. There are other relative pronouns, but we are going to focus the attention on those ones for today's class. Remember that those relative pronouns, they are super similar to the WH questions, but the use of them are completely different. And also because in the case of WH questions, we got what, and what is not a relative pronoun. And in the case of relative pronoun, we got that, and that is not a WH question. So they are similar, but they have also some differences, okay? And also, what is the most important is that they work in different ways. They work with different purposes. Well, another important aspect to keep in mind is that we can divide relative clauses in two. Relative clauses that are composed by two different pieces of information and the ones that they have three or more pieces of information. The ones with two, they are called defining relative clauses, and they are giving us just essential information about something, someone, yes. And we got here an example. A stepfather is a man who is married to your mother but isn't your father. I colored the first piece of information in green for you to understand that this is my first part of information. My second part of information is the blue one, and it says is married to your mother but isn't your father. Here I want to join these two different pieces of information. How? By using a bridge that in this case is who, because we are talking about a person that is a stepfather now. So in that case, the corresponding relative pronoun to join these two different pieces of information, the green one and the blue one, is who. Perfect. Let's see what's going on in here. They are telling us also that for defining relative pronouns, one piece of information depends on the other piece of information. I cannot skip one of them because then my sentence or my clause is not going to make any sense. What does it mean? It means that I cannot say a stepfather is a man. Yes, is a man that what or who what. Yes, you got to complement that information. Or you cannot say, is married to your mother but isn't your father. Yes, that's isolated. So the idea is to join these two to make a sentence that makes sense. This is the opposite way for the non-defining relative clauses. These non-defining relative clauses, they are giving us extra information that is not required, that it's not necessary, and that we can omit. In fact, we can skip that information, and my clause or my sentence, it's going to make a lot of sense. So here we got also an example. We got three different pieces of information in non-defining relative clauses. In this case, we got Jill, who used to be my neighbor, it's going to marry my nephew. In green color, we have the first part of the first piece of information. The second one is in purple, used to be my neighbor, and the third one is in blue, it's going to marry my nephew. So why it's important in here? In here, we are joining three different pieces of information by using the bridge of who, or the relative pronoun who, because we are talking about a person that is Jill now. So, in that sense, that is also important to mention that to separate these three different pieces of information, I will use commas. You cannot forget commas. Non-defining relative clauses, they use commas. Defining, they do not use commas, okay? And in here, if I omit the purple part, it's also a sentence that makes sense. I can say, Jill, who is going to marry my nephew, blah, 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 blah. But in the case of defining relative clauses, I cannot omit any part. What is the extra information, the not required information that I can hear? That this person used to be a neighbor. And I can omit that part, and my sentence is going to make sense either. Well, guys, let's summarize. On the page 164, you have the different uses of relative clauses that you can check and you can highlight. For example, in the first part of defining relative clauses, it says defining relative clauses provides information that are integral to the sentence, without which the sentence makes no sense. Please highlight this part in your notebooks, because this is like what can summarize what I was trying to explain here. Well, then we have that with defining relative clauses, we don't use commas. Please highlight this also, this part, because it's in terms of grammar, it's important. How can we separate the ideas or the pieces of information in defining relative clauses? By using the bridge. Then we got defining relative clauses can start with who or that it's for people, yes. That it's for things. Whose, that it's for possession and ownership, that I already said that. Where, that it's for places. When, that it's for time, well, we have checked that. And what is important here is the last part. Please highlight all this idea with example included. We can leave out the relative pronoun. It means that you can skip, you can omit the relative pronoun who and that, just who and that, circle them when they are followed by a noun or a pronoun. What is a pronoun? A person. What is a noun? Any word that can be combined but the article they. We have talked about it, no? The classroom, the teacher, the students, all of them are nouns. So let's see the example. In here it says, he is the man who or that I want to marry. Parentheses or brackets, they mean that you can omit this relative pronoun. Why? Because in here you have I, and I is a pronoun. So you can say he is the man who, or he is the man that I want to marry, or you can say he is the man I want to marry, and that's okay. But just with who and that when they are followed by a pronoun or a noun. This is the man who or that wants to marry me. In here I cannot omit it or skip it because I have a verb. The next sentence starts with a verb, not with a pronoun or with a noun. Non-defining relative clauses. Highlighters in your hands. Non-defining relative clauses always include a relative pronoun. Yes, of course, who, when, the ones that we already said. It means a bridge. They give additional information without which the sentence still makes sense. Please highlight all of these. If you omit the not required piece of information, your sentence is going to be correct. They are separated by commas. Please highlight this part. They start with the same relative pronoun as defining relative clauses, except that which replaces that. Please highlight which replaces that. In non-defining relative clauses, we cannot use that. We use which. Then we got non-defining relative clauses can also comment on the rest of the sentence, beginning with the pronoun wish. And we got an example. That's not important, so if you don't want to highlight it, it's okay. Let's continue. We got here like the summary of what we already said. We got relative clauses that they can be defining, relative clauses that we can leave out or skip who or that if the next word is a subject or is if it is a pronoun or if it is a noun. Well, guys, the girl who sits next to me, in this case, we cannot do it. And non-defined, because here we got a verb, no? But in the second example that says Olga is the girl who I sit next to, I can omit the who because I is a pronoun. Well, in non-defining relative clauses, which always come after a comma, you cannot leave out who, which, where. Well, in that case, you cannot omit any of the bridges. You need the bridges, okay? Well, we got it practicing here. You are going to find this exercise in the first part of page 38 and in the first part of page 39. It's about the position you got in your family. What birth order say about you? If you are the first kid, or if you are in the middle, or if you were born the last, etc., etc. So we are going to read in a very quickly way. Birth order is the key that can unlock your personality. That is a relative pronoun. Here are some generalizations that have come out of research carried out over the years. They omit the relative pronoun in there. The firstborn, el que nace de primeras. Parents learning to raise their first child tend to be extremely attentive and protective. Firstborn children who have their parents' undivided attention are responsible, reliable, and well-behaved. This from firstborn to well-behaved, it's a non-defining relative clause because they have commas, 1 comma, 2 commas, and they have 3 pieces of information. First children is the first one, who have their parents is the second one, and are responsible, reliable, etc. It's the third. Firstborn tend to be perfectionist, bursting with confidence, etc., which makes it hard for them to admit when they are wrong, which is definitely non-defining relative pronoun. In here, the middle child, we are going to select what is if we need who or if we don't need anything. Middle children who have been given or middle children given less attention. In that case, it's better to say it who have been. Yes, it's possible to do it without it, but let's do it with it. Their parents are more independent. Middle children wish or whose older siblings boss them around feel like it's unfair, etc., etc. So babies, I will ask you the favor to highlight what is the correct option if you need the bridge, if this is a defining relative clause or a non-defining relative clause, or if you can omit it according to what we have already explained. And the last part. Complete the sentences with which, that, where, whose, or hyphen if you don't need any relative clause, pronoun. My sister always leaves her clothes on the floor, which is very annoying. In my family, the person who cooks the most delicious food is my grandmother. They are talking about a person. I'm jealous of people. You can find this also on page 39. I'm sorry. I'm jealous of people whose parents, because it's a possession, emotion, let them do whatever they want. The only place where I can get some peace at home is the bathroom. My mother, who thinks I'm still a baby, worries when I go out late. This is a non-defining. And you can complete the other two on your books, babies. I think that's all for this class. If you have any question, please write me a direct message. Thank you so much for your attention and see you on our next class. Bye!